Let's be real for a second. The uncomfortable truth about human psychology and the unspoken social dynamics of power, well, it's rarely what they teach us in school. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into Robert Greene's masterful analysis of history to decode the invisible games happening all around us. You know, if you've ever felt the absolute sting of office politics, or kind of wondered why just putting your head down and working hard doesn't magically guarantee success, well, stick around, because we're going to decode the underlying rules. To really kick things off, listen to this brilliant insight from the great Renaissance diplomat Niccolo Machiavelli. Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good. It perfectly captures our central paradox. See? Feeling powerless? That's totally miserable. Literally no one wants less power. But overtly showing a hunger for it today? No way. That is incredibly dangerous.
So we're left with this crazy dilemma. On the outside, we have to appear, perfectly civilized, fair, decent, democratic. But if we actually play by those outward rules all the time, we get completely crushed by those who know better. We're forced to navigate this underlying reality that is honestly just a scheming, simmering cauldron of dark emotions like greed, envy, and a constant battle for control. You literally have to be congenial while remaining incredibly cunning.
And that brings us to the core philosophy of the 48 Laws of Power. In this explainer, we're going to strip away those polite facades and reveal the timeless rules of this constant duplicity. Now, we're definitely not endorsing these moves as moral, right? Instead, we're examining them impartially as a hard, timeless reality of human behavior that you absolutely need to be aware of.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the courtier's dilemma.
To understand our modern reality, Greene uses this amazing historical metaphor, the aristocratic court. Think back through history. The court formed around a king, a queen, an emperor. It was supposedly the absolute pinnacle of refinement and elegance. Violent or overt power grabs, totally frowned upon. So courtiers were forced to scheme silently and secretly against each other just to win favor. It was a never-ending game of extreme vigilance. Greene actually calls it a civilized war.
The crucial takeaway here is that a truly successful player learns to operate indirectly. Napoleon famously talked about this. He advised putting an iron hand inside a velvet glove. The perfect courtier learns to literally stab an opponent in the back while wearing that velvet glove, flashing the absolute sweetest smile you've ever seen. No crude coercion here. They get their way through charm, seduction, and really subtle deception.
Okay, moving right along to Section 2, beware the non-flair.
We all know these people, right? The ones who claim they've completely opted out of the power game because they think it's evil or outdated. Well, Greene totally calls their bluff. These supposed non-players actually use incredibly effective strategies to disguise their manipulation. Sometimes they flaunt their weakness or lack of power to gain sympathy, which, by the way, is actually Law 22, the surrender tactic. Or they demand strict equality, which very conveniently suppresses anyone who actually excels. They might even use perfect, brutal honesty. But think about it. Honesty usually hurts, and it's almost never free of personal motive, so they use it as a subtle way to coerce us into thinking they have this perfectly noble character. It's really just their own version of the velvet glove.
Greene makes this brilliant point. Sure, some genuinely innocent people play for power without really thinking about it, kind of like kids trying to get their way in an adult world. But adults who actively make a big show of their moral superiority, they're just throwing dust in our eyes. They're trying to distract us from their actual power plays. The people who make the biggest display of innocence are usually the least innocent of all. It's a huge red flag to watch out for in your own circles.
So how do we actually navigate this? Section 3, the art of concealment.
We've pulled together a framework for the modern courtier, and it all starts with the art of concealment. Literally, the foundation of the velvet glove. First up, keep people totally off balance. Law 3 tells us to conceal our intentions so others can't even prepare a defense. You pair that right up with Law 4. Always say less than necessary. Keep your words vague, open-ended, kind of sphinx-like. It prevents foolish mistakes and actually intimidates people. And while they're sitting there confused, you hit them with Law 14. Pose as a friend, work as a spy. You use polite, social encounters to artfully ask indirect questions and gather extremely valuable intel on your rivals.
Because look, this entire game is heavily based on perception. Your reputation is your absolute cornerstone of power. You have to guard it with your life, making yourself unassailable while maybe opening a few subtle holes in your enemies' reputations. And right alongside that is the absolute need to court attention. What is unseen counts for nothing. You can never, ever let yourself get buried in oblivion. You have to stand out and become a total magnet for attention.
All right, Section 4, Mastering the Strategy.
How does the perfect courtier go from just hiding their intentions to actually making decisive moves without blowing their cover? The text lays out a super clear path. When it's finally time to act, Law 9 says you must win through your actions, never through argument. Arguments just stir up resentment, right? Then, once you decide to move, Law 28 kicks in. Cast aside timidity and enter with total boldness. Audacious mistakes are fixed with even more audacity. And finally, Law 29. Plan all the way to the end. You have to account for every single twist of fortune so you guide the circumstances instead of letting them overwhelm you.
All of these decisive actions tie back so perfectly to our courtier image, especially with Law 30. Make your accomplishments seem completely effortless. Think about it. All the toil, the late-night practice, the subtle planning, those clever tricks we just talked about, they all have to be completely hidden. When you act, your power has to look totally natural, like you could do 1,000,000 times more without even breaking a sweat. If you go around showing people how hard you work, it just raises questions and totally gives away your tricks.
And even when you've achieved your goal, the game still isn't over. You have to manage the aftermath. Law 46 warns us that appearing too perfect creates silent enemies born out of pure envy. You actually have to protect yourself by occasionally showing off harmless little defects or vices just to seem more human and approachable. And maybe the most crucial of all, Law 48, assume formlessness. Never, ever bet on stability. You have to stay adaptable, fluid, constantly moving like water, accepting that absolutely everything changes.
As we wrap up this explainer on the hidden rules of society, one thing is absolutely clear. The dynamics of the aristocratic court are very, very much alive in our modern world. Understanding these laws isn't necessarily just about you seeking power. It's about recognizing when these timeless strategies are being played against you. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Now that you can see the strings being pulled, will you master the art of indirection or remain a pawn to those who do? Keep analyzing, keep learning, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.